Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Plant Powered Dog podcast. Today, I'd like to welcome a treasured colleague, friend, and really interesting guest to the podcast, Hetal Sheth. Hetal is a Silicon Valley techie turned animal advocate. In 2014, Hetal founded Curry and Pepper, a vegan pet food and lifestyle company in California based on the principles of Ayurveda. She also was key to launching the Curry and Pepper brand in India through H&N. A longtime pet parent raising plant-based dogs, Hetal moved to India and shifted her practice to India in order to help educate and empower pet parents on how to raise companion animals on a plant-based holistic lifestyle based on Ayurveda. Hetal has been on a mission to create more happy and healthy dogs by increasing access to plant-based Ayurvedic resources. She reminds us that our pets have a spiritual path and deserve attention at the levels of mind, body, and spirit. Hetal is an expert in whole food plant-based diets for canines, herbal remedies, flower therapies, herbs, and plant stem cell therapies for animals. She gained experience in animal health while volunteering at a veterinary hospital in San Francisco, California. She is currently training in clinical diagnosis and treatment of small animals. Hetal believes in prevention rather than cure and believes that there is a plant for every illness. I love that. Welcome to the Plant Powered Dog podcast, Hetal. It's great to have you
Thank you.
here.
That actually is a quote. It's a pleasure to be with you and connecting with you always. Yeah, that's a
Thank
line
you.
I think from the Bible.
That's wonderful. I love it. You know, First of all, a lot of people out there might not have much or even any experience with Ayurveda. So kind of let's start there. Can you describe it to us and like just give a little background on how you became interested in that branch of natural healing?
Sure. So, Ayurveda, people are familiar with it for humans, like it's widely practiced for humans. But what people have over the years, I think, lost is that Ayurveda is actually a science of life. The meaning of Ayurveda is the science of life. And it's something that's applicable for all living beings. So, growing up in India, where my dad was into making herbal products, and he also practiced like homeopathy as charity, and growing around with like preparing home remedies as first line of defense anytime there was an illness. That's how life was approached at, like with my grandmom and great grandmom being with us. So kind of we grew up with like the kitchen herbs kind of as the first natural line of defense. So it's somewhere like I think it was there as part of the heritage that came to us. But then when I came to the US, and this is before like, and we adopted curry and brownie, they came to us with a bunch of like health issues. So Curry was 6 years old when she came to me, and she had like grade 1 heart murmur, gastroenteritis, and even giardia. And she had a very sensitive tummy, and she would like react to like all kinds of food. Like, and back then, I think where she was at, she was primarily meat based or meat fed. And being a vegetarian back then, I was a vegetarian. So being a vegetarian, it was going to be hard for me to kind of bring meat home and be able to feed her. And so that's where this whole actually journey began, because we initially did start out with a vegan kibble for her, and we were kind of doing a whole lot of medicines and stuff for her to get her condition healed. And back then I had zero knowledge about like animal sciences or anything of that sort. So but then we did that for 2 months after having her, and we really saw no progress. We were kind of back to where we were in the beginning. So then I was just having this conversation with my husband, and we're like, we do so many things for ourselves, like in terms of like applying the principles of Ayurveda for ourselves and the remedies, and some of these things could be applicable for them as well. So like, why not try it for them? And
Right.
then I kind of started applying this for curry and brownie. I started doing like a mind body diet for them. We started using herbs and stuff like that. And amazingly, like in 2 to 3 months, we started seeing a transformation in them, and And then my neighbors actually saw what happened with them, like the change in them, and they started asking me. So that's how this whole journey began. So it was not something that I had planned, but I think it was something that was truly led by my dogs, you know. So I think they kind of gave me the purpose of my life. So that's
Yeah, you
basically
gave them what they needed, right?
into that.
Yeah.
I think I'll just share some principles of a very basic principle of what Ayurveda is and how herbs play into a picture, you know, because then I think there is that level of understanding what the interactions could be or what it could cause, you know, because it's a little bit of energetics that matter here. So maybe I'll just share my screen really quick.
Perfect.
So we all know what is Ayurveda for humans, but so what is Ayurveda for pets? You know, this is something I get asked a lot. So basically, Ayurveda, like I said earlier, is the science of life. So, like all human beings, all animals, all plants, every living being is made up of the same five elements of nature, that is air, fire, water, earth, and space. So we all are made of these five elements, and each of these five elements they combine to form certain energies. So, like for example, air and space combine to form the air energy. The water and fire combine to form the fire energy, and then earth and water combine to form the earth energy. So when I say air, vata means air. It's kind of light, flowing, moving, right? And then if you think about fire, is it's like and anything that is transformation, right? Like it's the change in
Mm,
energy, how it's working. So that's where the fire comes into picture. And earth is solid structure, right? So that's basically how these energies combine to form these three principal energies, the vata, pitta, and the kapha. So every being has a unique combination of the air, fire, and earth. So they combine in different proportions for everybody. So no two people have the same energies or the same combination. If However, one usually is dominant at any given time, like depending on the season, you know, and the at the time of conception, birth time, you know, there's one primarily dominant energy that is residing in every being, while the others do exist. But this dominant energy is the one that actually defines a being's personality from mind and body perspective, their what their primary emotions are, what their primary mental characteristics are, what their physical body is like, the shape, the metabolism, the kind of eyes you have, the hair, the coat, you know, all of that is defined by these three energies. So the dominant characteristic usually is what defines your mind and body personality. Would like
mm,
whether, you know, a dog or a cat is like anxious or fearful or is more the
mhm,
dominant type, or you know, it's that laid back, loves eating kind of type. It's these
mhm.
energies that define it. So, like I mentioned earlier, air is all flowing, right? Like this, it's constant, so it governs the movement in the body. So now that's a movement of thoughts, movement of air within the body through the hollow spaces. So if you think about it, like after the food is digested and everything, it has to be eliminated. So it's the flow of the air that is pushing everything
Mm,
forward, right? And then the fire, right? So the fire governs digestion, metabolism. So whatever we eat is transformed, it burns through the fire and is transformed into energy, blood, and then is kind of assimilated by the body into the tissues. So that is basically what the fire or the pitta governs. And then we have the earth element. So the earth element is basically our bones. So it's giving us stability and structure, you know, so it's defining how the
mm,
structure of a dog is, whether they're lean, whether they're like more on the broader end or, you know, on the heavier side. So that is governed by the earth element. So, so it's kind of really interesting when you actually see these characteristics, you can actually tell, and it applies to humans as well, right? Like you can tell whether they're an air dominant, whether they're fire dominant, whether they're earth dominant. So there's this like the air dominance or the vata dominant animal would typically, when in balance, they would be very lively, happy, very friendly, agile, quick to move around. You know, they're kind of always, because air is light, so they're always
mm,
in the go, like in the move. But however, when it is imbalanced, it could basically cause emotional disturbances where you will see the pet is very fearful or anxious. They have poor appetite, not eating regularly, like more variable appetite. Sometimes they eat, sometimes they don't eat. And based on these imbalances, when they continue to build up, they will lead to certain diseases for these kind. So
Mm,
the vata ones typically tend to have more of like, dry skin, dry coat, because if you think about air and it's too much, it's cooling, it's dry, right? So then you
mm,
see kind of manifesting on their skin and coat. Mentally, they can be, like I mentioned earlier, they can be more like fearful, anxious. So those behavioral aspects tend to come in. They tend to have poor digestion when imbalanced, so they don't metabolize the food well, so they tend to be on the leaner end, like it's hard for them to gain weight. So that would be like a vata dog. So likewise, a pitta, you can think about, like, let's say, so I'm not trying to stereotype, but you can think about like maybe a pit bull or something like that, where just from a physical structure point, where they're strong, like the dominant, like the pack leader qualities are there. So they're not really obese or fat, but just strong build, They have good
mm,
muscle strength. So that defines the pitta body. They will have like a nice coat, which is lustrous, but it'll be sparse. It won't be thick. It's
mm,
more on the thin. So when these dogs are in balance, they make excellent pack leaders. They are fearless and they kind of are very keen and eager to learn things. So these are the dogs that kind of make good guard dogs, or like, activity related herding dogs and things like that, because they have those characteristics to be able to quickly learn and
mm,
retain that. But however, when the fire is in out of balance, when you have like too much of fire, it can turn into aggression from a mental state. Like the pack leader qualities, the dominance, the territorialism increases and can lead to aggression. And likewise, from a physical manifestation, too much of fire is where you will see like they're always like, wanting to, like, having larger appetites than normal. Or, and
mm,
then because of that, they end up having like gastric upset. And so you can see things like diarrhea. You can see their bodies tend to run warm. And then you'll also see things like, you know, um, anemia and things like that are very common, like pitta characteristics. You could have arthritis both because of vata imbalance as well as pitta imbalance, depending on where the lifespan is at, So, so there are basically, with each of these characteristics, there are certain mental, physical, and emotional attributes, which, when out of balance, and they start accumulating, can lead to certain diseases. Likewise for the earth dog, you can think about like a golden retriever or lab. Doesn't mean that these breeds are always this kind. Okay, I'm just giving an example here. But so these are very loving, very caring dogs, like they're the ones who kind of tend to be by the pet parent primarily, hanging around them, and they also tend to be like food lovers, they love eating. And so emotionally, they can be like, when in balance, they can be that perfect companion animal that you're looking for, very calm and steady companion, balanced sort of. However, when the earth element gets out of balance, because it's the material aspect, you will see things like possessiveness coming into
mm,
picture, where they become possessive and they won't allow others to be around you or things like that, So that's again like a kappa imbalance. Uh, it can also lead to like greed, where overeating is another thing. So they tend to be like obese, and kappas don't
mm,
necessarily have great digestion. So that's where they can tend to be more obese, unlike the pittas who have good digestion. So they can kind of metabolize everything, So that's another reason why you can kind of see that they tend to be overweight. So they have issues that are more related to being overweight, heart related issues, circulation related issues that come up with, like, because water is another element of the kapha, right? So blood, the circulation of the blood, all of that is governed by the kapha, along with providing stability. Uh, so that's how these energies are. So the philosophy around which we are based is prevention is better than cure. So if you kind of think about the mental, emotional, and the physical aspects, you understand where the dominant characteristic lies that they're born with, then you can very easily create a lifestyle for them, and you can prevent certain diseases because you're managing early on as opposed to like doing things after. So that's the whole philosophy of Ayurveda. Actually, while Ayurveda is a medical science now, it is more, the philosophy is all based around prevention. It's a lifestyle basically, right? So depending on the mind body characteristics, there are certain herbs that you can use. So like there are Indian herbs, you have the Western herbs. So there are a whole lot of different herbs that are there that can apply for each of these kinds. So like for example, if you think about vata, which is dry and cooling, you want to give herbs that are more grounding, because if you think air is in the movement, right? So you want them to be more connected and grounded. So grounding herbs, warming herbs would help. Likewise
Mm,
with pitta, because it's the heat, so you want to cool it off to balance it, right? Or if they have a low fire, then you want to kind of up it a little bit notch. So you would use more like cooling light herbs. Kapha is heavy in nature, so the herbs here are more warming. So that if you think about it, when you heat water, it turns into vapor, it becomes light. So when you add warming herbs to kapha, you're kind of making it lighter.
mm,
So removing some of that density. So that's how this
mm.
works. So there's this energetics, the energies of cooling and warming, grounding, that you need to be able to understand to be able to use the right herb, because herbs can be great when used in the right amount in the right way. They can provide a lot of different health, emotional, and mental benefits to our animals, just like they do for us. Also, herbs also have to be used very carefully, because some herbs will have interactions with medications, like because they're material compounds, right? And our allopathic medications are material compounds. They are isolates, whereas the Ayurvedic herbs are whole plant herbs, so they're whole compounds. So there has to be synergy between the two if you have to use both of them together. Sometimes there are interactions and contradictions, so these are things that you need to be mindful about when you're giving herbs to your animals. But we think something is good for something, and we tend to overdo. So that's where I think we need to draw a balance and be a little bit thoughtful about how we administer it to them. And animals respond to these kind of herbs a lot more faster than us humans, because they're not judgmental. So the response is much more faster that I see, like when I give it to cats and dogs versus when I'm taking it myself.
Right, they don't have any preconceived notion of what it
Yeah,
should do. They just there and
right.
there's no placebo effect either. It just if it's,
Yeah.
working, it's working for sure. Yeah. I mean, question. So every individual have so they have the predominant Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Does that ever change, or is the dominant one always going to be the dominant one? That's how we're born, like our DNA.
That's a great question. So basically, these elements will combine. And so when we are born, right, we have one nature, what we call our true nature, right? That is our inherent personality. So we will have one of these, or sometimes a combination of these, as our inherent true quality. But however, doshas change with season, doshas change with our environment. It can be intrinsic and extrinsic factors that can lead for the doshas to change. So extrinsic, a simple example would be, let's think about seasons, right? Like, so when you move, like now in the western side, where I am at, it's monsoon right now, but in your end of the world, it's more fall time that we're entering, right? So fall time is the vata season. So at that time, dogs that are prone to like vata, uh, primarily vata, will see an increase in vata. Pitta could potentially move towards vata if the pitta is unbalanced, right? So the doshas could change with the season. Just like that, when you enter from fall to spring is the season of kapha, because it
Hmm.
rains and stuff, so water element is coming in. So it can potentially lower like the pitta, or like the vata, and kind of shift them more towards kapha. And then when you move from spring to summer, summer is the season of pitta, the fire. So they change. So you could see your animals and us humans to shift doshas through the seasons. Sometimes even like emotional factors can cause our doshas to change. So because these are all energies at the end of the day, so it's not constant, they're constantly
Mm.
changing. But however, regardless of the change, the inherent nature, the balanced state that you are born with, because when everyone is born, we're all born with a balanced state, that remains. So your personality type kind of remains, but the doshas will, if that makes sense, the energies will change with the seasons. And intrinsic factors could be, like our thoughts. If I'm predominantly having certain kind of thoughts, that can shift my doshas as well. Or
Mm.
another example would be if I'm eating one particular kind of food all the time. um, let's say like I like eating sweet food all the time, and I'm constantly eating the sweet food. It accumulates over a period of time and cause a dosha imbalance, and potentially shift from maybe from pitta to more of like kapha if I'm a pitta dominant person. So these factors there, so there are a lot of the intrinsic and extrinsic factors that can cause these doshas to change. So normally
Mm.
I tell people, like, it's a good idea to kind of just do a check every 3 months, see where you are at, see what you need to balance, because whatever comes out as the dominant is where you're going to be needing to balance to restore that balanced state again. So that, and so when you create, because this is a preventive lifestyle, when you create your daily routines for your animal or for yourself, you're creating it based on the seasons, based on the local environment, in terms of diet, in terms of herbs, or in terms of grooming. It's based on what geographical factors you are close to. So then you're kind of in tune with nature, more aligned with nature, because at the end of the day, we are all an integrated part of nature, right? So yeah, so that
Which is
was a very
interesting because obviously, with Western medicine, they don't take that into account at all. I mean, if you have a migraine in January and you have a migraine in August, you get the same migraine medication. So,
yeah.
right? But with Ayurveda, that remedy might be totally different depending upon the season or other factors.
Right. Yeah, and you'll
Yeah.
see these changes in your animals too, right? Like, oftentimes a lot of dogs have like white flakes, dry skin, like more during the fall time, because the weather has shifted. It's more dry now. Vata has increased in the environment, so Vata starts increasing in the body. Right? So likewise, in the summertime, you will see that they kind of tend to overheat. The body overheats a lot because there's heat in the environment too,
Right.
and at the same time, if you're feeding warming foods, it's not going to connect very well. So yeah.
Interesting. That really is just medicine based on nature, the way it should be. Yeah, and, so you have, the dosha quiz. So what are the types of questions that people would, wanna kind of eke out about their animals to see what their predominant dosha is?
So the quiz actually evaluates the mental characteristics of the animal, the physical and metabolic characteristics as well. So when you answer those questions, it basically will tell you which is your primary dosha, which is the predominant one. So that basically is like, so the quiz that we have online is a more general basic quiz. And then, we do like, depending on like the health status of your animal, we do more in-depth evaluation to see where the imbalances are. So the dosha quiz is basically helping you identify what drives your dog's primarily mental, emotional, and physical state. Like, what is that state that is inherent to them. So that's basically what we identify. And then when we're evaluating cases, we do assessment to understand where the imbalances are based on that. So this is like the first step to identifying how you can restore balance into your animal's life.
So what conditions do you see come your way a lot that you find are particularly helpful? I imagine that Ayurveda can apply to anything, but what are you seeing the most of that you have really great results with?
So I think Ayurveda applies to a lot of different conditions. But I've been here, like here in after I've moved here, I've been seeing a lot of cases where we see like kidney issues, CKD, and then I've also been seeing a lot of mobility related issues like arthritis and things like that. And Um, a lot of dogs here end up having arthritis and bone and
Mm,
joint problems very
mm,
early on, partly because not everybody is on a balanced diet. So that's another thing, like, where we see these issues crop up, where they have movement related issues. And then
mm,
we also see a lot of skin related issues. So this was something I personally experienced with Curry and Brownie too when we moved from there to here. It's primarily because of the environmental factors, the humidity levels. And then we also see like a lot of gut related issues, um, where they have like GI issues of different kinds, like whether it's frequent diarrhea, again, that's sometimes because of the climate or the kind of food that they're eating. And a lot of times it's also because of the emotional mental state that the animal has consistently been in, so that kind of impacts the physical body as well. So I found that, like,
mm.
Ayurveda to be very helpful in all of these cases that I mentioned. It works on a lot of other cases as well, but these are something that we've seen quite often, like where it's been very helpful.
So you do a lot with flower remedies. Is that's also part of the Ayurvedic concept, or is that sort of a different approach?
Sure. So flower remedies. So generally when you say flower remedies, what comes to mind is back flower remedy, uh,
Right.
which uh, which was a system designed by Dr. Edward Bach back in the 1920s to the 1940s timeframe. So flowers have been part of the Indian culture and heritage over thousands of years, whether it was for adornment or for decoration or for medicinal herbal remedies being made out of flowers. So flowers were being used for in a lot of different ways, right from material form to other forms, for healing purposes. So the branch that uses flowers for healing is known as Pushpa Ayurveda, meaning it's flower Ayurveda. So the story goes like when Buddha was like, practicing meditation, was on his spiritual path. There was a time in his journey that he kind of was going through a lot of intense fasting. And as a result of that intense austere fasting, his body took a toll. And, and he was like really at a point where he would kind of, collapse. So at that time, some Jain priests basically uh, took water, put it on a petal of lotus, and offered it to him, or the nectar was basically offered on a lotus petal. And when Buddha basically took that, his body started changing, like he started
Mm,
healing basically. So this was a system, the Indian flower remedies was a system that was actually being used by Jain priests a lot,
mm,
back in the time of Lord Mahavir and Lord Buddha, because they really liked the knowledge that was there with Ayurveda. But with Ayurveda, as you know, or like if you're not aware of, it also calls for use of certain animal products quite a bit. Um,
mm.
so they didn't like that concept of using animal products or meat, or like, because the Jain
Right.
philosophy is based on non-violence or ahimsa. So they came up with this method of using flowers, because they knew like flowers had a lot of healing potential, healing energy, and that water had memory. So they came up with this method
Mm,
of harnessing that healing energy into water and administering that as medicine. So they, back then, they had identified like some 18,000 different flowers that could be used for
mm,
medicinal purposes. Unfortunately, a lot of those scriptures are now been destroyed, so
mm,
it no longer exists. However, my mentors were Dr. Rupa and Dr. Atul Shah. They, over the last 40 years, have put in a lot of effort around around this area, and they've actually discovered a lot of these Indian flowers, or rediscovered a lot of these Indian flowers, and started
mm.
creating the remedies back again. So um,
Wow.
flowers, so like, like the back flowers are mostly alcohol based and or glycerin based. So where the flowers are actually plucked and then, the energy is harnessed into water. Unlike the Indian flower remedies that are made here or by Om, they are not plucked. So they're in harmony with nature. These remedies are actually made without plucking the flowers. And they're always all water based. They do not use any alcohol or glycerin for preservation. So they've come up with this method where through water they can kind of, have that kind of stability and administer the remedies in a water base, basically. So I find it to be more put. Back remedies work great as well. I've trained and used back remedies. They work great as well. But I find these to be even more powerful, just because the flowers are not plucked, right? Like when you pluck a flower, they also go through shock, like trauma. So I feel like some of those energies are like withdrawn, Uh, Whereas when you're actually getting the healing energy without plucking the flower, it's actually in full flow. So it's a very spiritual process where all the energies of the universe are combining to kind of be able to give us that knowledge. So that's how the Indian flowers are basically working. So again, it was Ian Downey who led me into this journey, because when we moved here, it was it was a big shift for them. While they were total troopers, they did great in terms of adapting to the life here. I think it was a lot harder for me than it was for them, but they did great. But the weather was the hardest part on them because it's quite humid and quite hot where I am at down south. So that was a bit of a challenge, and I was trying to get these backflower remedies from UK or from US, and it was such a challenge to get the original remedies, and by the time it would arrive here, it would be so expensive. So I was like, we have so many different flower remedies in different parts of the world, so there has to be something here. And I started searching, and that's how I came upon the Indian flower remedies, and then I trained myself with them, to be able to start using. So this is something I've been using quite often in a lot of the healing work that we do here at Curry and Pepper, because it just works so beautifully. If you think about it, like all of us, we have a physical body, and then we have like an energy body, right? So flowers, if you think about it, um, they bloom from the bud. They're part of the plant, so they're harnessing all the five elements of nature that we discussed earlier to be a full bloom and thrive. Now, whether the seasons change, whether the weather changes, whether the soil quality changes, whether there are different insects coming on, they still know how to thrive. So they have that inherent information uh, through
Mm,
nature. So that's basically what we are harnessing in the water, basically, like every flower, because different flowers grow in different environments, so they have different information, right? So that is what we are capturing in the water and administering as remedies, basically. So they work not only at emotional, mental, physical, but even at spiritual level. So it's like almost like it's a permanent fix. It's like when your system is bugged, you're downloading a fix. It's the same kind of, it's a permanent fix, so it's not something you're kind of constantly treating. Like if you think about allopathic medicines that you're giving, you're treating symptoms, so it's a constant process, right? Like there's no permanent relief. So that's what we hear, because this is a holistic approach. You're kind of trying to alleviate or eliminate the root cause, basically.
mm. That is so tell me, how do you harness the power of the flower without, while still keeping the flower intact and not plucking the flower?
Yeah, so like Dr. Rupa and Atul, they've devised this very special process and it's a very proprietary process that they've come up with, where they kind of do this, So if in layman's terms, if you want to just think about it, it's like if you were to dip the flower in a bowl of, in a clear bowl of water, spring water, in the right environmental conditions for a certain amount of time, the energy is being transferred. So I think there's scientific studies that have been done in Germany,
Wow.
where they've
Wow.
put different flowers and different beakers of spring water, and at the end, when they've analyzed it, they've seen that the energy and the water structures are completely different for each of them, because they're all bearing different information.
Yes.
So that's in
Oh,
a
that's
nutshell the
fabulous.
philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fabulous because, like you said, you're not shocking the flower. You're not removing any of the life force of the flower,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, with for example, with the Bach flower remedies, because they do contain typically contain alcohol, is that safe for our dogs?
It is safe for our animals because you're giving it in a diluted form. So it's quite diluted. By the time you give it to the animal, it's quite diluted. So it's totally safe. And I think now in the US and Europe, you even have the glycerin-based versions that are available. So those are also safe. The challenge that I've always found is, like even in that ultimate diluted form, you can still smell the alcohol. So, a lot of dogs or cats would not be willing to take it directly, like in water or something, unless you put it like in a
Right.
treat or like food. But that's not the challenge that I have here with Indian flowers, because it's just water based, right? So there's no smell or
Mm,
taste to that. And they readily accept. So in fact, Curry used to self-select her remedies, like, and she would know exactly how much she wanted and when she didn't want it. So it was amazing observing her, how she would select. And I think she's taught me quite a bit too in terms of how it works with animals, because they
right.
can tune into that energy, like just imagine
Mm.
trying to give a pill, like, and it's so much of a challenge versus this. They just readily accept it. Uh,
They're so wise, right? We were talking previously about just how intuitive and emotionally wise they are. So they know what they need.
yeah, they know
Um,
exactly what they need. And I think just because they're so much more in tune with nature, they know what to pick as well.
hmm. So when you give the flower remedy, you touched on this. Do you put it in their water, in their food? How does
So
that work?
yeah, so the remedies can be depending on the condition that we're trying to help the animal with, So I'll just give an example. So there was this dog that was extremely, like, normally he was very well behaved, calm, happy kind of a dog. But when they had guests over at home, he would turn into like this little monster where he was like being very defensive about the territory, protecting their humans, and kind of to the point where he would get aggressive and even snap, if anybody got close to the humans. So this family could never always have guests around comfortably without putting him away or without him being part of the whole activity. So there was obviously in this case there was an emotional balance that needed to be restored, because his aggression stemmed from fear. Like when we did the assessment, it stemmed from fear, and it stemmed from other aspects as well. So we kind of we helped him through with the flower remedies for fear. And since these were given, like, so for back flower the dosing is very different versus the Indian flower dosing that you would do. So for Indian flowers we typically do 3 drops 3 times a day, so you can just put them directly into your dog's mouth, or like I normally prefer putting them on a spoon and just letting them lick. They'll just take it away right away. So it's super easy. In acute cases, you can administer them in a little bit of water, and the frequency can be changed depending on the need. Like we're heading into Diwali this weekend, so there's going to be a ton of fireworks, and you know what fireworks does to
Mm,
animals. And that kind of
I
an
know.
acute situation, this is something I would give to Brownie in a water base more frequently, to help him cope with the sound and the vibrations of the fireworks. So it kind of really depends on a case to case basis. It's very individualistic, because Ayurveda views every being as an individual, because we are all different. We all respond to different situations differently, and it's the same with our animals.
So typically, the thought process is that with natural remedies, as opposed to, pharmaceutical remedies that are kind of more of a band-aid, but with a pharmaceutical remedy, you might see more immediate, I would say, results. They're not curing anything, but, just the headache goes away or what have you, the diarrhea clears up. Um, with the flower remedies, you're also making it kind of, I'm getting the impression that they work pretty fast, which surprises me. I would think that it might take weeks or even months for this to have an effect.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast it works because it's based on quantum physics. So if you think about quantum physics, the rate at which energy
Mm,
travels the particles, it's so rapid, right? So it's the same thing. So like I was saying earlier, we have a physical body, we have an energy body, what we call as the aura. Our animals have that as well, like they have the physical body and then they
right.
have the aura. So the layer of the aura that is called the etheric energy, which is the first layer between the physical body and the other energy bodies, contains the blueprint of the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, basically. So the mind, body, spirit, how to keep that in balance. Its job is to protect our mind, body, and spirit, basically. So
Mm,
whenever there is like a bug in there in the etheric energy, that's when disease manifests in the body. And the bug could be because maybe there's an emotional issue, maybe there was something that happened externally, environmentally. So and we believe through our practice that most diseases manifest in the emotional mental level first, and then they kind of go down into the physical body when they've accumulated over a period of time. So like for example, so there's this emotion mind body connection, right? So for example, if you were to think about a dog or a cat or any animal that is fearful, how do they exhibit fear? They would get into the flight response, they would be nervous, they would try to hide, or they would tremble, or they would urinate or defecate, right, out of fear. So now if you think about like when the fear, if they've lived in a constant state of fear, what's going to happen? Their kidneys are going to be affected because that's where the emotion is stored, right? So likewise, when a
mm.
dog that's always been aggressive and lived in that state of aggression for whatever reason, because of whatever trauma it's been through, right? The liver is affected because that's
Mm.
where the energy is. So there is this whole mind body mapping. And so that's where I think it's really important to look at it in a whole way. So this dog that I was mentioning about earlier, so we started him with the remedies for fear. There was a huge improvement, he shifted. And then, but he was not 100% yet. Okay. So then we kind of, I interviewed the family, got to know what their surroundings and environments were more. And I discovered that he was attached to the pet parent's son. Okay. He was quite closely bonded. And his son had been through some life challenges in his early teens, which had left a strong imprint in his life. And those imprints had made him now, and he is now in his early 30s, had made him a very angry person, like a short-tempered person,
Mm.
basically. And
Mm.
so this dog was mirroring him. So when I discovered that this is where the connection is, and so instead of giving the dog the remedy, this time I gave it to the son. So he took 2 doses of the remedy and the dog had fixed. It took
Oh.
only two
Now, was he
doses.
fixed? Was he fixed as well,
He's
or?
he's working on his aspects as well. I mean, he opted
Oh,
not to go the remedy route, so but uh
but it
so they so you see
fixed him.
how in tune they are, so that's why I think it's really we have to look at the whole picture, not just the mind body, but even the environment where we are.
The
So
environment.
yeah. And like
Yes.
even with Brownie, like when he had a muscle injury, when I actually was just back from one of my flower remedy workshops, and I came back home and he was like, he wouldn't move, he was in such severe pain. Like he'd injured himself doing some of his acrobatic stuff. He's always jumping around everywhere. And so he was in extreme pain. Like he couldn't even get up to kind of, come to the door and like when I had come home.
Mm.
So that pain he was in. And when I came home, I was so shocked to see him that way. And I was like, and it was a weekend and it was going to be hard for me to find a vet. And if I did go to one, the only thing they were going to do was give him a painkiller and give him a steroid shot. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try the remedies first. If it doesn't work, then I'll figure it out. And he was in a condition where I couldn't even take him to physio, because it was too much pain for him
Mm,
to even go to physio at that point. So I just did the remedies. Like within a day, he actually started moving around, he had a
mm.
slight limp. He was mobile. So then he was ready, like his pain was completely gone. So I didn't have to do any painkiller or steroids. I was able to take him for his physio, and his physio was amazed. He's like,
Mm.
normally something like this would take 3 to 4 sessions of body work for me to do. And he was fixed like in one session. So flower remedies
Mm.
work great on their
Fun.
own. They're super fast. They complement any other therapy that you do. They enhance it and take it to the next level. So I even use flower remedies when I'm transitioning dogs from like a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet. And it really helps, because it's working at the whole mind-body level.
That's fabulous. And you have created your own Ayurvedic products, right? That people can actually purchase online.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there are
Tell
certain
us about
blends.
that.
Yeah, there are
Yeah.
certain blends that we've created because, when we started this journey for curry and brownie, it was a lot of work doing everything separately, and because they were both completely different individuals. So it was kind of challenging to kind of be able to do everything for them. So I figured like if it is so hard for me, nobody else is ever going to do it just because it's so much more work, right? So this whole goal with curry and pepper was to make Ayurvedic living for animals simple and easy. So that's where we came up with our line of products. So before I share about like the products, I'm just going to share a little bit of tidbits with some of the herbs that I work quite a lot with, and it's also in our products, just so that we're able to understand how it all comes together. Like for example, ashwagandha. So ashwagandha is also known as a rejuvenator. It's an adaptogen. And a lot of us take ashwagandha for our own immune health, and it's great for our animals too, like for our dogs, cats, horses. Ashwagandha basically means the smell of a horse, because that's how the herb basically smells, and it gives the strength and vigor like a horse. So it's a great nervine tonic. It is it. There's been studies done that actually show that dogs. These studies were specifically done on dogs where dogs taking ashwagandha tend to respond better to stress. The cortisol levels come down, the cortisol creatinine ratios also come down where dogs are taking ashwagandha at the right dosage based on their body weight. It helps with insomnia. Dogs with constipation, it helps them as well. It is anti-arthritic. It has ability to help alleviate pain. It is also a great immune booster and balances hormones, and it activates our immune system cells, and it has great tissue building properties. So basically what it does is it reduces vata and kapha and increases the pitta. So this is something that would
Mm.
be ideal like for a vata dog, an air dog. So this is part of our basically a vata balancer. So what we've created these balancers, the vata balancer, pitta, and the kapha balancer. That is basically so you don't have to figure out what herbs to give your dog. We've done all the hard work, we've
Right.
created the right blend, and we've just included them as a pre-blend. So when you kind of just incorporate that into your dog's routine based on the season, starting with your dog's primary dosha, it takes care of them through the year round challenges. Likewise, amla is another excellent anti-inflammatory. It is great for the immune system because it's an excellent source of natural vitamin C. Instead of you having to give something that is synthesized, this is a natural source of vitamin C. And it's great antioxidant. It's great for the eyes, heart, anemia, nervous disorders. A lot. These are just some of the indications that I have listed here, but it works on a wide variety of indications. It is and these herbs are something that I've always given to both curry and brownie. I think that's partly the reason why they're still mobile. It's only now that they've started having early stages of eye changes, basically cataracts setting in, but they still haven't lost vision. Otherwise, you can see like after age of 6, the onset is at any time,
Mm,
basically. And it's a great
mm,
antioxidant as well. And so this is cooling, like if you remember excess fire causing a lot of heat. So this is a great cooling herb. So this is part of our pitta blend. It's something that we use in our pitta balancer. And then trifla. So trifla is known as three fruits. It's a combination of three herbs that creates this particular herb. And it's very widely used in Ayurveda for a lot of different aspects because it has detoxing and cleansing properties. So when trifla is used, it kind of helps our animals detox and cleanse naturally. So it helps maintain a healthy gut. So when
mm.
our gut in a healthy place, clean, you can build your life force, which is known as ojas. So you're building vitality. It also helps improve the oral microbiome. Again, there are studies done around these that where they show that it helps with the oral microbiome as well as the gut microbiome. So each of these balancers, you can actually use it as your herb addition to the daily routine, or you can even just add coconut oil and use it as a toothpaste for your dog. So it's all in
Mm,
one. You don't have to have too many products. And yeah, like I
nice.
said, it works for dogs with allergies, because again, allergies occur when there is clogging of a lot of toxins in the body, and the gut is not in a great place, like you may have seen as well, right? So this is part of our all three blends, the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, because it balances all three doshas. They're formulated in specific ways just so that they all have the right amount for each of these doshas. So the Vata balancer
Mm,
is great for dogs that have that are very nervous, constantly in a state of stress, have constipation. Because if you think about fear, you're also kind of controlling, your muscles are tight, so you kind of tend to go into the state of poor digestion and eventually constipation. So it works for dogs with constipation, skin issues, like so it because it has things like sesame seeds and stuff like that, so it kind of provides hydration as well, or lubrication. Our pitta
moisture.
balance,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
So a pitta balancer is more on the cooling end, where it helps balance the fire. So dogs that are prone to mobility issues, it's great for them. We've seen great stories where, like senior dogs with mobility issues could barely walk, can now run with consistent use of the
mm,
pitta balancer. Uh,
mm.
Likewise, the kappa balancer is great for dogs that are, prone to like gaining weight, because it helps boost the digestion. So, you're kind of bringing that balance back in. It also is great for circulation and respiratory issues. So that's how they work at a lot of different levels, but these are just like the um, some examples. So what happens is when you incorporate these herbs um, in your dog's or cat's life, you will actually see that they're kind of, the health is improving overall. You're actually able to prevent certain diseases, because you're maintaining the healthy material aspects of the body. So herbs work at a material level, whereas the flower remedies work at a higher level. Like I said, they work more at a so these work at a mind body level. The flower remedies work at a mind body and spirit level. So sometimes I combine flower remedies with these to take it up to the next level, depending on the case, basically.
So I'm obviously going to put the information for curry and pepper, and you have it here, but I will also put that uh, at the bottom on the YouTube channel so that people can contact you, they can purchase the products. And I assume you work with people all over the world, so it's not a problem if someone from the US or Canada wants to work with you, correct?
Yeah, so we do work with people from various locations, because most of it is all online on Zoom, and we do ship our products as well. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'll tell you, I learned so much today. And in talking about the energetics, I just find that just so interesting. And prevention, right? Prevention. Just Western medicine doesn't think about preventing disease at all. And they really don't think about the interplay between our mind, body, spirit. It's just not something, if you go to the doctor or you take your dog to the veterinarian, at least here, that you're going to hear about. So thank you so much for, bringing that aspect of really important aspect of care to our dogs. And I hope that people enjoyed this as much as I did. I learned a ton, and I'm sure they did too. And like I said, I will put your website information, and I hope that people, reach out and, kind of pursue this avenue for their dogs. It's awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Diana. And I really appreciate this because I think this is perfectly in line with what you do because food is also medicine. And again,
Right.
that is prevention too, right? So I think, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being
Yep.
here.
It's a pleasure being here with you. Thank you. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of the Plant Powered Dog Podcast. And be sure to reach out to Hetal with any questions, and I know she'll get back to you.